Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. In this video, we're going to do a few garden tasks, talk through a few things that are happening here in the Raleigh garden, go over some plants that are looking pretty good right this minute. I just raked out the wood chip path in the front garden where we have this little piece of path that goes to the bench and then cuts through the middle and then goes around the house so that we have, a path system. I showed in another video the other day what I did the back. We did the back last week. Got this put out and raked out this morning. We need some rain here. It's weird. Every single time we get we're supposed to have rain. Like if you look at our 10-day forecast right now, there's 6 days have rain on it right now. But it seems like every single time we get close to one of those days, it backs off, rains somewhere else, does something different. So it's kind of curious about whether or not we're going to actually get any substantial rain here during February. I'd like to get, these paths are this thick, but it's mostly just because it's really fluffy right this minute. If we got a rain, it'd cut that in half probably pretty quickly. But we got that out. I got to get some compost out in the annual beds. I put up a video on Friday, the 5-Minute Friday video about composting our annual beds. And when I say annual beds, I include the vegetable garden in that. I got some of that done, but not all of that done. So that's another project going on out here. We still have a few annuals we haven't pulled out here or there, a few perennials that haven't been cut back. So there's some projects to do. We're gonna cut back some butterfly bushes in this video. So several things coming up here. This camellia is really super interesting. And did we do we haven't done a single plant video for this. This is Camellia handeli. Snowbells, and it's just starting to bloom now, and it will bloom basically from the interior out over time. The flower buds along the stems are all the way out here to the end, and it starts to open the oldest buds down in the middle of the plant, which have been slightly more winter protected. So this is a slightly smaller, well, more than slightly smaller camellia flower, but when this thing really gets going here in the next week or two, you're gonna see it just incredibly colorful. And so we have, that one's just beginning to bloom. So Camellia handeli is just a different species of camellia than we're used to. We're used to, Camellia japonicas, a few hybrids, Camellia sasanquas and Camellia sinensis is T. There's a lot of camellias, a lot of camellia species out there that are underused, really, and we're seeing some others coming soon as well. Holly's up here on the sofa above, trying to make the video without. She's 16. She can still jump on the sofa and look out the window. I've got a lot of rabbits out here right now, and she does have a tendency sometimes to enjoy rabbit waste, and we will so I'm keeping her inside a little bit right this minute because she'll make herself sick sometimes. That the Edgeworthia chrysantha is starting to open flowers, and we smelled it last night. We came home last evening, and the entire front garden had this fragrance in it. It's a little bit breezy this morning, and I think it's blowing the fragrance off, but you see individual flowers starting to open within that grouping of flowers. The thing looks like it's in flower all winter long because it has these kind of silverish buds that droop down on it. But really getting started flowering, it'll just be super fragrant out here and we've got the right weather for it, where the temperatures, it's not gonna get hot on us. I think last year, like this thing started opening and we had like 75-degree day or something like that. It really burned it out pretty quickly. But we have the perfect weather right now where it's gonna be temperatures in the low 50s and nights in the upper 30s. So it's not gonna freeze them off, and it's not going to, overheat them either. So I think it'll be blooming for a long period of time. Ultimately, we wanna limb this up a bit and allow it to just be a large shrub that's, kind of naked at the bottom, so we can keep things planted around it. We like to do that. Several different plants in the garden here that we've limbed up into small trees. This one, I'm not gonna cut it today, but as soon as it finishes flowering, I am gonna cut it. I think you can maybe see down here at the bottom, there's basically 5 trunks. So, I've got 1, 2, 3 that are the main 3 in the middle, and then I've got these 2 coming off the side, kind of running across the ground. They're loaded up with flower buds, and overall the plant looks good, but I think I'm gonna take these 2 off right down to the bottom of the plant after it finishes flowering. So we'll enjoy this fragrance out here and then take these 2 off. I'll probably show it in a video. It's literally gonna be chop, no big deal. But I think that will make the plant overall more uniform, or it's just going to be 3 trunks coming from the bottom. This is an area we're going to rework quite a bit this season. We've got a few things overcrowded in here and a couple things in a little bit too much shade. That viburnum nudum that's back behind this Grand Cascade butterfly bush is going over to the native garden, and there's a couple hydrangea paniculatas here. One will just, I think we're going to go from 2 to 1 and bring one out where this Grand Cascade is in a little bit more sun than the Grand Cascade butterfly bush. I don't know if it's going to stay in this garden or we're going to give it away or whatever, but I'm going to go ahead and cut it down now. I always prune my butterfly bushes. You don't have to prune them, but here's the thing. This butterfly bush has to get bigger in order to bloom this year because it blooms on new growth. And they're actually quite brittle. I mean, if we went in here, I'm going to cut this limb all the way back, but I kind of want to show, if I just bend this branch, barely bend it, how easily that pops off. So imagine if I let this butterfly bush be this full and be 10 feet tall, the first time we get an ice storm, it's going to break it apart. And when it breaks it apart, sometimes they'll break apart down at the very bottom of the plant, and then that will, you know, that will just destroy it. I've had that happen before. So again, you can hear how brittle that is, right? So I just go down to, you know, on most of these butterfly bushes, about 18 inches. We've got a couple dwarfs over there. I'll show you one. We'll probably go a little bit lower than that. Doing this in February before the new growth starts on them typically, but we actually have some growth happening on these already. And again, I'm lowering it to about, this thing seems to want to grow about 4 feet every year before it blooms. So if I want it blooming at 6 feet tall, I'm just going to cut it down to 2 feet tall. It's pretty straightforward. And I'll cut them above a bud on the branch, so it'll be easier to see this once I cut a couple back. But right above one of the pieces of growth on a stem like that, so you got that growth right there on that stem, I just cut it right above it and just go through pretty quick, just identifying those spots. If there's no growth along the stem, I'll just cut it what looks like a natural bud will be on the side of the branch. And then there. This is all good material for our composting operation, or it could just be that I take it and just cut it down into small pieces and throw it right here on the ground under something else and just chop and drop and move on with my days. But it could be cut into smaller pieces and just go into the compost pile. Using the right tool this tool is plenty big to cut through this easily, so I don't have to strain to do it, right? That's the main thing. If I had a pair of hand pruners out here, there's a few of these branches, I'd be damaging my pruners, right? But this one, you know, boom, just takes it right off. I'm not dulling the tool, I'm not hurting the plant. And just like that, butterfly bush is cut back. All of this material, you can do whatever you want to do with it. If you want to take a piece and cut a couple pieces in half like that and throw them under something else, you know, that's now mulch for that holly back there. Doesn't matter. Or again, it can be chopped into smaller pieces, go in the compost bin, whatever you want to do with it. You make art out of it if you want to, but this butterfly bush, again, this one's going to move. We have, I don't know how we ended up with like 7 or 8 butterfly bushes in this garden. Not a giant butterfly bush fan, but we keep collecting them somehow, and we've ended up with about 7. So I'm just going to go through and knock them all out. Steph is a fan of butterfly bushes, so that's exactly how it happened. And they are, of course, frequently visited by, you know, lots of native and non-native pollinators like honeybees. But that's quick and easy. You know, if I didn't do all that talking, I'd be done with it, literally done with this job, again, using the right tool in seconds. Went over there and pruned the dwarf butterfly bushes. Technique is exactly the same. Look for a bud along the stem, prune it just above it. Those dwarf ones that only get 2.5, 3 feet during the growing season can go down to 12 inches or even slightly less. The larger growing ones, I'm just cutting them down basically 4 or 5 feet below where I want them to bloom. And so, you know, making quick work of that. You can wait a little later on that process if you want to, but once I see a little bit of new growth coming out on the base of them like that, I go ahead and get it over with at that time. Interesting observation here between the leaf. We have a lot of leafy evergreen plants in this garden, as you guys know. We're able to in zone 8A here in Raleigh have lots of, you know, there are lots of options for plants that keep their leaves during the winter time, other than conifers. This Marvel Mahonia is a zone 6 leafy evergreen. 0 damage, and the flowers bloomed through the entire cold that we had during the winter. So several nights in the low teens, which isn't cold for a lot of areas of the country, but when you're growing a lot of leafy evergreen plants, lots of nights in the teens over the course of a winter can do some damage to some of them. But this one is completely unfazed, right, by that and bloomed through it. The mountain snow Pieris right here, another great example. This is a zone 5 leafy evergreen, which there are not a whole lot of those out in the world. I need to get in here and knock some of these leaves down out of it because it's about to start flowering. And again, it's just completely unfazed, right, by how much cold we had. Even the zone 7, you know, Camellia sasanquas, 0 damage here in the garden, regardless of their age. And we'll show you one that's blooming to wrap this video up. But mine, zone 7B, zone 8, pittosporums that didn't go to sleep properly have some damage on them. So they have some damage in that new growth. Ultimately, it's not going to matter. I can go ahead and I can shear this off at some point, or I can just let the new growth kind of overtake it. It's completely alive. I mean, it's all pliable. There's no actual real damage to it, but it is interesting when you're talking about pushing the boundaries on something. There's a reason this is a zone 8 plant, and it's very close to the edge of where, you know, it was almost too cold for it, you know, without some protection. Whereas, you know, this is a 1.5 zones hardier than my area. That's 2.5 zones hardier than my area. The Pieris back there, completely unfazed, and you can really see that through the garden. All the things that are zone 8 to 10 are the things that have the little bit of burn on the top of them. The little bit of, you know, because we were right at that edge of where those things could be damaged, but not normally damaged. I don't think this would have had any damage on it had we had fall, had we had a slow step down in temperature. We just skipped fall and went straight to 14 degrees. You know, we had a 60-degree night, a couple back-to-back 60-degree nights in November, and then had winter come. And so a plant like this that doesn't know how to go to sleep properly anyway in a cold winter, you know, it got amplified a bit. I don't expect to have that problem in the future, but I thought it is interesting to look here at the differences in these leafy evergreens and how some of them are much more capable of taking care of themselves despite the fact that the temperature is, you know, we had a very different fall than normal. If you go back to the very beginning of this project, first or second video that ever went up, there was a big redbud right here, and it was dominating this back corner. But it was one of those plants, you know, and I try to, in consultations, I'll point this out sometimes. A lot of times, if you bring a tree, like an ornamental tree that has a low canopy on it, out into the middle of your garden somewhere, it can block the entire back corner of it's behind it, make the entire area, the space behind it. But so this would have been a redbud that had come up on its own at some point in the past here in this garden. And it was, you know, it was a pretty big, we have another one over here that's unfortunately looks like it might be dying, and several other redbuds here in the garden. But this one was just dominating this space, but not allowing us to do anything else with anything behind it or around it. So this is a tree we cut down, but the stump has been here the entire time since I cut it down because this root material is much harder than everything else. But this morning I've finally been able to get enough of it out. There's no longer a tripping hazard here in the path. We had open garden here last year, and I was worried the whole time that, you know, there's a big stump in the middle of the path. Well, stump is finally gone. Most of this material, if it's just smaller pieces like this, they can just stay here in the path or go up under another plant or something. This bigger chunk, I may try to break it up or throw it under something here in the garden. It just doesn't matter to me. But nice to finally be able to get that thing out. But it's amazing how long a stump can take. This is a small stump. You know, this is only this big around. And it's been 5 years in the making since that tree was taken down for me to be able to chip it out this morning. We have this Camellia sasanqua called Bella Rouge. Lots of dwarf sasanquas here in the garden. We've got white shishi, light pink shishi, ruby, and it's Bella Rouge. These are all kind of spreading, lower growing Camellia sasanquas. This one looks fantastic. It's near, so most of the time our Camellia sasanquas bloom in the fall, and then they'll have some residuals, buds that will be left on them in the after the worst of the cold passes in the winter. It's usually not as many flowers as this one has. Normally, they're mostly done and the Camellia japonicas kind of take over, and you saw that Camellia handlei out in the front garden blooming now, and a lot of other species tend to bloom after we get some significant cold during the winter time. But I really do like this Bella Rouge. If you can find this variety, the flowers are beautiful. The habit is really fantastic. So most camellias, when we think of camellias, you know, get big and you need lots and lots of space for them. And ultimately, I will say, no matter what size camellia you get or whatever the growth habit naturally is, it will creep up in height. You know, over the years, it will slowly creep up in height, but this one is controllable like this. I can control the spreading a bit by pulling it in after it flowers. This will be the time to prune it as the flowers are winding down. I can pull it in this way. If I have a spiky piece of growth that's coming up higher than I want, I can cut that way down in the plant. So whereas it will still get big, it gets big slower, and it's much easier to control. So there's some things that are looking pretty good in the garden this morning. A couple things that I'll have to do a little bit of pruning on later that have a little bit of damage on them, and we're cutting back butterfly bushes, cutting back any of the rest of our non-native perennials. There's a butterfly bush here that needs to be cut down. This one's in a lot of shade and is never as full as others, but we have a hummingbird feeder in the redbud here, and we have this butterfly bush that gets up here high enough so when we sit on the back porch here, we have the hummingbirds and pollinators coming at this right height for these screens on the back porch. So that's why this one's been left here, because it brings things right to you while you're sitting out here on the back porch, which is kind of nice. So we've kept this as kind of a little bird oasis over here. It's where the bird bath is, and you know, we can draw them in, but not disturb them when we're sitting out here on the porch. So thank you guys so much for following along. There'll be more content like this over the next couple of weeks, because we really need to jump in here and get this thing completely cleaned up, all the compost spread, we've gotten wood chips back down in the paths, just neatening everything up and getting ready for everything to come out of dormancy here in the next 4 to 8 weeks. Thanks for watching.